Welcome to an in-depth look at Advanced Gunnery Control. In this video we will have a look at the mod Advanced Gunnery Control in a little bit more depth than the video Advanced Gunnery Control in 60 seconds. So let's get started. In this video we will talk about the advanced mode, which you can enter via this button. We will talk about ship modes that pop up here when we are in advanced mode. We will talk about how you can combine different tags for weapons to achieve the behavior you want to have. We will talk about the campaign GUI and which additional options that one offers. We will talk about the option to apply tags automatically available through the campaign GUI, and we will have a very brief look at the settings file with which you can further customize the behavior of the mod. So without further ado, let's get started. First, the weapon here to advanced and to simple. Simple mode is where you start in, where you will have a limited selection of tags and ship modes won't be available. If you click to advanced, you can see that a lot more stuff appears on the screen. This is saved per save file, so if you always want to be in advanced mode, you only have to click this button once per campaign. Now, the first thing you might have noticed is that we have a lot more tags here and that a tag scroll bar appeared up here. This means that now, because there are too many tags to fit all of them on screen, you can use the mouse wheel to scroll through the available tags. You will also notice that down here a new row appeared called ship modes. These ship AI modes will modify the behavior that an AI controls the ship. That means it won't have any effect on the player-controlled ship unless you enter autopilot mode using the U key by default. So you can activate as many of these as you want at the same time, and each one will have a specified effect on the ship AI. For instance, the spam system mode makes it so that the ship AI will always use the ship system if it's off cooldown. The shields up mode will prevent the ship from lowering its shields while it's engaged in combat and has less than 90% flux buildup, for instance. Now let's talk about combining different weapon tags. As you might have noticed, you can select more than one tag per weapon group. And there's a couple of nice things you can do with this. For instance, for the pulse laser, I already mentioned I generally like the avoid armor attack for pulse lasers so that it doesn't simply shoot ineffective shots against armor. Because it's a somewhat flux-hungry weapon, I don't want it to accidentally overload me, so I'll usually apply the tag hold fire when flux above 90%. And now maybe I wanted to still shoot ineffective shots against armor when my flux is below 50%. So with these three tags activated, if my ship flux is below 50%, the laser will simply fire all the time. Once my flux is above 50%, the laser will stop shooting if the shot is likely to hit armor and the armor value is too high for the laser to do much. And once my ship flux exceeds 90%, the weapon will stop firing altogether. Similarly, for example, for our Atropos class torpedo rags, usually I'll simply manually control them and don't need any tags for them because tags don't influence manually controlled weapon groups in any way. But let's just say I'm lazy, then I could, for instance, set up my Atropos class torpedoes like this. I could first say ship target. That means they will only fire if I select an enemy ship using the R key. So if I don't have an enemy selected with the R key, they won't ever fire. Next things, I probably never want my Atropos to fire against fighters, so if I for some reason select enemy fighters with the R key, the Atropos torpedoes still won't fire. Next, I probably don't want to shoot my Atropos torpedoes at ships that are far away, because that way I give them way too much time to run away or dodge the missiles. So I'll pop in the range below 60% tag. And lastly, Atropos torpedoes do high explosive damage, so I probably don't want to shoot them at enemy shields. So I would also apply the avoid shields tag. And then, just for a little demonstration, I'll set my PD lasers to PD. I'll set my ion cannon to avoid shields, because shooting an ion cannon against shields usually doesn't do much. And again, I'll say, hey, as long as my flux is below 50%, I don't mind firing my ion cannon against shields. Now let's do a little demonstration and have a look at how this works. Let's say against a... let's not take the overdriven lasher, that might actually kill me, so let's test it against a regular old lasher. And let's set everything to auto fire, select an empty weapon group by pressing the key 5, and let's have a look if everything works. So, great. The lasher flamed me out. But yeah, we can see, hey, we are below 50% flux, so the ion cannon actually starts fires, even though it's likely to hit shields. The enemy flux is high, so and we're close enough, so our Atropos torpedoes start firing. And the enemy armor is already broken, so our pulse laser fires. So yeah, everything looks good. Everything went pretty much as expected. Alright, now we talked about everything I wanted to talk about in the combat GUI, so next let's have a look at the campaign GUI. So, as I said, the campaign GUI is accessed the same way as the combat GUI, simply while on the campaign map, press the J key and a ship selection menu will pop up. Select a ship of your choice, and in here we can see this looks very similar to the in combat GUI. We have all the available ship modes, we have all the available weapon tags, and we can scroll through them using the scroll wheel. But now you might notice down here there's also a couple more options. For example, there's the cycle loadout option, which I didn't talk about before. So, as you can see now, on loadout 1, which is the default loadout, everything we just saw in the combat GUI is still applied. If we select the next loadout, that one is currently empty. What this allows us to do is to set up like some random stuff here, set some random stuff up here, whatever. And now you can see we can cycle through these loadouts. In the combat GUI, there's also a button to cycle loadouts, so we can simply, if we encounter a situation where the tags we previously set up isn't good for, we can create a new loadout or cycle to a new loadout that better suits the situation at hand. Usually it makes sense for your loadouts to be similar, and because it would be a lot of work to set up all the loadouts completely manually, the next option is to copy the previous loadout. So if I click this, it will simply copy everything from loadout 1 to loadout 2, and now let's say, hey, in this one, for instance, I don't know, we don't want the ion cannon to avoid shields, so we just do the modification we wanted, and you can see loadout 2 is now the same as loadout 1, except for the changes we made. Also, usually if you want to set loadouts, it's pretty nice to simply set up all the tags for each ship in your fleet, and then you can press the shift button and do copy previous loadout for entire fleet. So now it won't do it only for our wolf, but in this case also for our kite. Let's set up some random stuff for our kite in loadout 1. Let's go to loadout 2. We can see nothing is set up here. Let's reset this. So oops. So now we can see loadout 1 is set up for both ships, loadout 2 doesn't have anything, and if we now press Shift and 3, you can see that for both ships it copied loadout 1 into loadout 2. With the tab key we can cycle through all the ships we have. With number 5, with reset or delete key, we can delete all the current settings to start from 0. Now here's the option to load suggested modes. We'll talk about that in a little moment. Now we have the option to copy to other ships of the same variant. This means if you, for example, I don't know, purchase 5 lashers and you don't want to have to set up each one individually, and you can simply use auto fit in the refit screen to set them up all the same way. Set up the tags for one of them and then click this button to copy the tags to all other ships of the same variant. Reload settings. If you edit the settings.editme file and don't want to have to restart Starsector, you can simply hit this button to have the changes you made to the settings file take effect immediately. Of course, we can switch back to simple mode. And that's pretty much the new options that the campaign GUI offers, with one more thing which I want to talk about now, which is the Customize Suggested Tags button. If you click here, you can see the previous GUI closes and a new one opens. And in here, you can see there's essentially a list of all weapons that are currently in the game. You can cycle through them by using the arrow keys. And again, we can scroll the tags using the scroll wheel. Now in here, if you don't want to have to always spend so much time manually setting up your tags, in here you can simply choose default tags for each weapon. For example, let's find ones we care about. Let's say we want to filter, and let's say we want to set up default modes for the pulse laser. So we'll say we want energy weapons that are medium size. So it should now be a little bit easier to find the pulse laser. Here it is. Let's just say we always want our pulse laser to avoid armor, avoid shields, hold flux, avoid phase, and I don't know, only target the ship target. So now we set this up as the suggested tags for this weapon. And now let's leave this page, go to our wolf again, and now let's say load suggested modes. Now you can see we previously set avoid shields, avoid armor, hold flux, avoid phased, and ship target as the default modes for the pulse laser. So now it applied those default modes to the pulse laser. There's one or two more things we can do here. We can click the backup button. This will, let's just put some random stuff in here. Now if I click the backup button, all the things I have currently set for all the weapons will get written to a file in your saves folder. And now if I reset everything back to the default modes, you can see all the settings I just did are gone. But now I can click restore and it will load all the random stuff I just set from the file. You can first use this as like a regular backup, so if you're messing around with stuff and don't like what you did, you can load the previous one, but you can also use this if you start a new campaign and want to use the same default modes you set in a previous campaign. You can simply come into this GUI, click the restore button, and you have the exact same settings that you had in your last campaign. And then one last thing I want to mention is you can enable auto apply. If you click this, all these suggested tags we have set up here will get automatically applied to ships when they get deployed in combat and don't have any tags set up for the corresponding weapon groups. So for example, let's again say we want to have a look at medium energy weapons to find our pulse laser. And You remember these are the tags we set for the pulse laser. So now let's go to our wolf here, click reset to reset all the tags, so no weapon group has any tags now. And remember, I can just show you again, we now have auto apply enabled. So if we enter a simulation, remember we didn't have any tags set up. Now if I press the J key, you can see that it automatically loaded all the tags based on the suggested tags we just set up in the campaign GUI. So that's everything I wanted to say at the about the campaign GUI. Now one last thing I want to show you is the settings file. So for that, let's leave Starsector and have a look at the settings file. You can find it in the Advanced Gunnery Controls folder. There will be a file called settings.editme, and in here you can customize tons of stuff about how the mod behaves. I pretty much only want to highlight one thing in here. Here you can see a list of all the available tags. But if you look up here, you can see that there's actually more tags available. But simply to not overwhelm you with a scroll bar that's like 3 screens big, I decided to only have some of them enabled by default. But if you, for example, want to have the option for your weapons to only shoot at overloaded targets, maybe you have some finisher type missiles, you can always take overloaded here, put a comma at the end of the list, add overloaded, and now when you next start up Starsector, the overloaded tag will also become available. So I think this video has already been going on for more than long enough. I hope this shows most of the concepts and controls available for Advanced Gunnery Control and is at least somewhat helpful. So please don't let me keep you any longer. Enjoy your game, have fun, and thanks for listening to me rambling for so long. Bye bye.